Okay, we're recording. Hi, I'm Lynn Cockrum-Murphy, and this is another of Sacred Spirit Interactive Podcasts. Today, I have brought a guest on that I want you to meet and learn about. He's a fascinating person to me, and I thought he might be to you. This is K.Lee Marks, and I met him just 4 or 5 months ago. We've done some work together, and I think that you'll find him fascinating too. K.Lee, would you tell us a little bit about your work? I know you as a podcaster and a person who helps podcasters, but I think that there's an awful lot that you do beyond that. And I love the fact that you help spiritual entrepreneurs. Tell us more.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me on, Lynn. It's great to be with you. And yeah, spiritual entrepreneurs, it's a really interesting word because immediately it calls to mind, like, how do you balance those two? How are you spiritual, but capitalistic and business minded? And, one of the words that's actually been kind of intriguing me lately is impact investing or like venture philanthropy. So how do we use, like, I think of money as an energy. And actually in the Vedic tradition, fortune and wealth and those things are called Lakshmi, and it's represented by the goddess Lakshmi. And so it's like an energy flow. And so what I've been experiencing is if I tried to go after the money, and if I try to contain the money in my own ecosystem, it stifles the energy flow, right? It's like a water hose. Whereas if I'm more open and I feel more spiritually grounded, or I feel more, when I say spiritually grounded, I mean not only operating on what I see and feel and can sense with my material senses, but what is going on in my inner world. And it seems like, to the extent that I'm open, more opportunities arise and more collaborations arise. And so, yeah, I mean, that's just the first thing that I think about when I think about spiritual entrepreneurs. But I think there's a real shift happening right now on the planet where people are not waking up, but they're tuning in. They're feeling into their stress and their anxiety and their depression and their joy and their inspiration and their dreams. And I think with the lockdown, everyone kind of had a awakening to have a different income stream, but not just a different income stream, a different lifestyle and a different set of goals. Just completely shifted, right? It was like someone pulled a tablecloth out from the table, but all the silverware and platters went everywhere. And so we're all kind of figuring out now how to move into this next phase. And some people had already started building. So in my case, I had started my online work already and had one foot in it. But then I was also teaching K through 12 performance arts, electronic music, podcasting, magic, and sleight of hand. And then when the lockdown hit, I just transitioned fully to my online business, which is Podcast Farm. Mm-hmm. And just a quick cut there. I just wanted to say, just for future, it's K.Lee is how you pronounce my name, not Kelly.
Okay.
I just want to say that. And then, okay, I'll help you clip this out.
Okay, good. Another question I had for you was, I get the impression that you combine your work and your spirituality. So on the same note of what you were talking about, maybe if you would talk more about that. I think it's common in America that people go to church on Sunday, maybe Wednesday night, maybe Saturday, but it doesn't go into their work. In fact, I taught school for a long time, and because of the separation of church and state, it was not okay to bring those things into the classroom. So you combine them. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, can I make sure I understand real quick? So combining like more spiritual lifestyle with the business, is that what you're saying?
Yes, and Well, in a minute, I was going to even ask you about Bhakti. How do you bring your spiritual practice into your work? Are they separate? Maybe they're more separate than I think.
Yeah, it's a great question and a great exploration. I think it's vulnerable to be authentic and to be ourselves. And I also think it's the key to growing an online brand, because people need trust more than ever. So I think when I first started, I tried to keep it very professional and clean and not share those parts. But what happened is then I became just like another podcast brand out there on Instagram, let's say. And so my work has really been to try to bring back in my medicine, my gifts that my teachers have given me, and to try and share that in a way that feels authentic and natural. And so the goal with Podcast Farm is to help conscious creators and spiritual entrepreneurs amplify what they love and create community and cash flow around it. And in order to do that, it takes a massive amount of work to build this and a massive amount of self-work to do this. So much comes up as you're reaching out to strangers. So much comes up as you're doing sales call, even trying to sell and put a value on my time. All that stuff brings up a lot of really great work. And I'll give a shout out to Jessie Johnson of Jessie Johnson Coaching for some amazing content that she has about how to turn sales into your spiritual practice. And I feel like it's so real, because at the end of the day, we get on the phone with someone and the goal shouldn't be to convince them. The goal should be to serve them. And the goal should be to really give them clarity and understand what it is that they need. And, it's something that we do together, a sale. We create a sale, or we create marketing. And what that has done is it forces me to really align. So having these containers of sales calls, for instance, we'll take it, can become like a spiritual practice for sure, where it's like sitting down, grounding into the moment, thinking about the person I'm going to speak to, realizing that how many billions of years have conspired to make this one moment happen where these two souls are going to talk. And if I can give something to them to actually benefit them, then that makes me feel fulfilled and on purpose. And maybe they have something to give me. And, so kind of being open to synchronicity and chance is one way. And then another way is the sort of motto or the hashtag of my brand is amplify what you love. And I believe that we are amplifiers. Our soul resonates our being and drives our being. And therefore we are resonators. We are amplifiers of our being and of our true self. And the way for me personally, to kind of stay rooted in that is to follow my joy, follow my excitement, follow what motivates me and kind of brings me into a sense of connection, and to broadcast that, and also to turn up the volume on people who inspire me in that way. And I feel like there's so much potential for that. So those are just a couple ways. I think it's an ongoing process how to integrate that spiritual side with the business side. And I definitely don't have anything figured out. I'm just another soul on their way home.
You mentioned being vulnerable and then needing to do your own personal work. And I think that that's a really important point, because when you're connecting with people publicly, if you're not comfortable with yourself, you're going to have a hard time when stuff comes up. And when you're working with people, stuff comes up.
Yeah.
So also, I like the different terms that you have for having a conscious business. I worked with a coach quite a couple of years ago that worked with conscious corporations. And it was the first time I'd heard that term. And it was like, my goodness, there is such a thing. Wow. I'm so happy.
Yeah. There's some great terms floating around. I think after a decade, we kind of get tired of whatever the lexicon was, and a new one has to form so that it can stand out. And I love that, how language is constantly evolving.
Constantly evolving. So I want to ask about Bhakti, because I know that you live that, and I'm familiar with it because I've been to some of the same temples that you've been to in India. And I think most of the world doesn't know what that is. I wanted you to talk about it because it was very important to me. It was a deep dive and it made me very, very happy.
Thank you for asking this question, because it gives me an opportunity to remember something that my teachers have shared with me, and I'll do my best to share that right now. One of the first things to think about in the Bhakti Yoga tradition is Guru. And generally, before anyone speaks, they do something called a Mangalacharan, which is an auspicious invocation. And very simply, it's like a prayer to the Guru, to our teacher, not a guru in the sense of like a marketing guru, but our true inner guide and an outer guide that meets our inner guide. So one example might be like Om Gyana Timirandasya Ginanjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha, which is and simply it's a prayer that is honoring Guru for opening our eyes, for illuminating the lamp of knowledge and putting out the darkness of ignorance. And so with that, there's so much that can come through when we connect to our spiritual preceptors, to the great hearts and souls of the planet. So bhakti means love. Bhakti is so deep, and it's like an endless, infinite ocean of love. But love is an easy way to kind of understand it. And bhakti is also so in yoga, you do stretches, right? Yoga has all these different limbs, nam, niyam, all these different things, asan. So the sitting and the stretching is only one part, but then there's mantra, there's chanting, there's bhakti yoga, there's connecting the heart in union with the divine. And in the Vaishnav bhakti yoga tradition, because there's different schools of thought, one of the great things about Indian Vedic thought is how advanced the philosophy and the science of spirituality has been for thousands and thousands of years, and how rigorous they cited each other and kind of passed the knowledge down. And again, it's called the disciplic succession, which is from teacher to student to student to student and so on. And so bhakti yoga is the practice of yoga, meaning to yoke or to link with God. And in our tradition, God is twofold. God is feminine and masculine. We call that all that is in its two forms as Sri Krishna and Srimati Radharani, the supreme goddess and the supreme personality of God. And it's one relationship to have with the supreme. And there's infinite varieties of relationships that every soul has with the supreme, because we all have our unique existence and consciousness. And yet we're also simultaneously one with all of that. And so bhakti, the real flavor, bhakti is all about flavor and nectar and bliss. Bhakti is about being kind to source and accepting all that happens, and caring about source as if source was our child, as if source energy God was our best friend, as if source energy God was our beloved, right? And so for me, that is why I feel so drawn to the path, because there's so much room for every heart to connect and devote themselves and worship the supreme. And one of the simplest ways we do that is by chanting. And we chant names on these malas, 108 beads, and we chant different mantras. And the simplest mantra is the Maha mantra. It's also the most powerful mantra according to the Vaishnav philosophy. And it's very much just calling out to God and Goddess as personalities and asking for their mercy. And it's an infinite pattern or code or signal. It's an infinite signal to tap into and connect with beings across all time and space, if you believe in that. And if you believe in a more real material sense, it's a sacred mantra that's been passed down for thousands of years that has brought joy and love and connection and inspiration to countless souls.
So that's the Maha?
Maha, which is like the great mantra.
Well,
the Hare Krishna Maha mantra, and it goes Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And we chant that daily. And, it's part of the daily routine of bhakti yoga.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've done that while traveling in India, and found it so satisfying that one round of the 108 beads isn't enough. When you do 2 or 3, or that's when it becomes really connected. It's it's hard for me to put into words, but I feel less separate from that which I seek
Mm.
in that
hmm
process. Yeah.
Sounds like it's working. I'm curious your experience with chanting in India, especially. It must have been so special. It's a very ripe place for devotion because everyone is chanting some mantra.
Yeah. And visiting the temples, at first I was like, this is beautiful. This is amazing. This is interesting. It's different. But after a number of days, I was prone on the floor, just in surrender and in love. It was very transformative.
Beautiful.
There was something I saw I don't remember if it was on your website or exactly where it was, but it mentioned attachment science. And I was curious about that because I can only guess what it is.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating area of research, and I'm by no means an expert, but I have devoted quite a bit of hours to studying it. And um, it's interesting because, kind of tying back into Bhakti yoga, it's said that one of the causes, or the main cause, of our suffering here is attachment, which is, it's an interesting juxtaposition. It's almost like, because we care about things, or because we are attached to them, we want it to go our way. We have a preconceived notion of what is mine, what isn't mine, what I want, what I don't want. When things go off track, it can be really confronting and intense. And so it's said that attachment, if we can be detached, if we can be surrendered, then we experience a more joyful, peaceful life. And then moving over into the relationship psychology and human development side of things, attachment is one of our core needs. It's like one of our absolutely essential needs to survive. So if we think about this from infancy, the only thing you need as a human to survive is attachment. You need to hold on to your mom. Your mom needs to hold on to you. You need to like actually have affection and be attached to someone.
Yeah.
And you need to express yourself, right? I'm hungry, I'm sad, I need to go to the bathroom, whatever. You need to express yourself. And so attachment science is the study of what happens in early childhood development, generally the first 2 years, give or take. And it is the most vital phase for our programming and for how we show up in relationship. And I know a little bit about you, and that you've been in partnership. So basically, I would say that anyone who's been in somewhat of a long-term partnership has experienced attachment theory, because it's this system that gets activated when honeymoon phase is over. It's the system that continually gets activated, because when we're young, we never have to be as close to someone and as intimate as we did to our parents and our family system. And then when we go out in the world, we're friends and stuff, but then we don't really peel back all the layers until we're in relationship with someone. And so there's certain labels that are given to help people understand where they fit, and they're not good and they're not bad, and they're not necessarily fixed, but they're not necessarily like have to be changed. It's just self-knowledge so that we can navigate our relationships and our partnerships and our own self-love in a more efficient, effective way. So, broadly speaking, to borrow from the author Stan Tatkin, a great therapist, psychologist, and worked on this a lot. He has a book called Wired for Love, and he talks about islands, waves, and anchors. So anchors will be securely attached. They received enough affection and safety, and they were seen in their experience, and they weren't shut down and shamed all the time for expressing themselves and being angry. And so they built a secure attachment where it's safe to go to my parents, it's safe to go to my caregiver, I'm loved as I am, I can get in trouble, but it's handled in a healthy way. And that I trust my parents coming back. So there's a very secure attachment there. for islands and waves, and I'm more on the island side personally. Islands will tend to isolate and to be alone, and maybe it was either not enough attention when they're young, or too much, or something that made them like made us crave isolation or space, or it's too confronting to be next to someone, right? So that would be the island attachment style. And then there's the wave, which is like a wave, kind of comes towards. So if you think about the island and the wave is always coming towards, and the island's always kind of going away, trying to get space. And this is a very common relationship dynamic that people that I've been in and people get into, because there's a lot of polarity there. But it's the distancer pursuer thing. And so the work is to lean in. So for islands to go towards, and for waves to go to wait, for waves to hold on, and to both kind of be with the sensations that come up and trigger, and to clear it. So that's kind of just a broad overview of attachment theory. But when you kind of start to get into it, it makes so much sense in so many ways. And when you read authors like Stan Tatkin, or if you listen to a mentor of mine, Jason Gaddis from the Relationship School, talk about it, they can go very, very deep. And it's all about the brain. It's all about the brain science and how we do it. So, how that connects to attachment in this world is an interesting conversation. I'm not sure if there's time for it today, but it's definitely an interesting one.
I do think we have some time to go a little further into it. One of the things I noticed is I studied Buddhism in particular, became a Buddhist when I was a teenager. And I bring that up because actually I'm having trouble remembering why I brought that up.
Was it attachment?
Well, let me switch gears for a second. I learned about attachment theory when I was getting my counseling license, and also because I was a special ed teacher, and that children who didn't get through that attachment phase and bond well with their family and get what they needed, they were always going to be needy and have difficulty with children, with teachers, so that was a big part of my work. And then as a substance abuse counselor later on, I certainly saw that amongst my clients who were trying to meet unmet needs or obliterate their awareness of unmet needs. Yeah. So
I love that term. I mean, how you said that just then is amazing. Obliterate. Did you say obliterate the feeling of it? How did you phrase that?
Their unmet needs.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is a common thing, especially for men. And in my past, like using things to numb out, using different substances or things to not feel the feeling. And it seems like the feeling is the gateway to the healing. Feeling is the gateway to the healing.
Yeah. And the numbing out is all of our avoidance, allowing that to pass so that we can be real and do the work, which is a little painful usually, to get to the other side so that we're much more whole and complete. And the research that I did back when I was doing my doctorate said that like 95% of us didn't get everything that we needed when we were little. Only about 5% of, in America anyway, came through their childhood like really whole and self-sufficient and confident and all of that. So the rest of us really do need tools, awareness, knowledge, assistance, and all that.
Mm-hmm. Assistance for sure. I think a lot of couples think they have to do it alone, or that something's wrong if they get coaching or counseling or something. And it couldn't be farther from the truth. I think that something's right. If stuff's coming up, it's coming through, it's coming out.
Yeah. And you referred to my being in a long-term relationship, and that is 36 years of marriage, and waves, I would say, is part of, you ride those waves and trust that if you really like that person or care about that person, probably there's a way through. And we have gone to marriage counseling, not recently, but in the earlier years. We'd go for like 3 months or 6 months and work through whatever it was. And then it would be really comfortable for quite a while until the next whatever thing came up.
Yeah. Seasons, right? It's all about
Yeah.
that's the other hugest thing that I've been learning from my mentors is, and any couple that's been together for a long time kind of acts as a mentor for me in a sense, because they're like a beacon, is that it's always going to be difficult and triggering and waves, and that's okay. And the fantasy of this perfect ideal thing where it's always romantic and spicy and spiritual and calm, and it's like, it's just not like that. It's going to be life. However, I do believe that finding someone that you can weather the storm with is a fortunate, wonderful gift from the universe.
I agree. I agree. Back to attachment, it seems that and Buddhism taught non-attachment, that as you were saying, that it's our attachments that cause us grief.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we can't really live here and be non-attached. I mean, we try, but it takes tools, or it takes skill, it takes awareness. So what are some of the tools that you're aware of that help dealing with attachment and the pain of attachment?
Just breathing, really feeling what's coming up. I'm not in a position as someone with so many attachments that bring me suffering to really instruct anyone on how to undo it. But what the things that do help me deal with the suffering that comes from attachment is reading Hafiz poems. Honestly, lovers of God are the most inspiring folks to me, and they make me have faith in the universe, because they see all of creation, the devouring lions and fires and murderers, and the young loving couples, and the impact, the social impact work, the social justice, people out there really creating positive change. All of that engine of digestion and recreation and regeneration is a manifestation of God, and therefore to deny any part of it is to deny the whole. And so they give me a language of love in which to handle the agony of existence. And so reading poems from Bhakti yogis, or reading or not reading, but doing breath work, doing somatic practices. So feeling feelings, not numbing out, really, really processing. And that's definitely something that I still struggle with, is setting aside enough time to really feel. I'm like a go. I think, you do these wonderful body scans, and something that stuck with me a lot from the time that we did the body scan, like I've been thinking about it a lot, is you felt an immense amount of energy in my head. And it's so accurate. I can get stuck in thoughts, and thoughts are such a flickering and distracting thing sometimes. And so just, whenever I can build my meditation practice back up, or my chanting, it always really helps. It always helps me deal with it and surrender. But I think surrender is the key, because we can't get rid of suffering. We can't get rid of attachment. Maybe the only way we can get rid of attachment is to attach to something eternal rather than something temporary. So there's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita. Let's see if I can remember it. Na sata vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sata. Abhayo rapi drishto natastva nayos tattva, which is that of the eternal there is no end, and of the material there is no continuation. It's temporary. And the seers of the truth have concluded this by studying the nature of both of them. And I'm not saying this translation perfect, but how I read it, and how I read the interpretation from my spiritual teachers, is that what is temporary is not eternal. That which changes is not eternal. So we see our body changing, we see the world changing, and you know, from a physics point of view, it's all these particles and, you know, just combusting and reconfiguring. So there is no, it's all change, it's all transformation. And what is eternal, the only thing we can really pinpoint is our consciousness, is our self. And so to bring more and more attachment, self-attachment, to bring more and more devotion to the inner world, the inner being. And I think that's the lifelong pursuit for each of us, because at the end of our life, we go there all the way, whether we like it or not. So I think practicing that non-attachment, and psychedelics really help, honestly. I think that's why MAPS is making such headway with psilocybin for depression and for people who have terminal conditions, because psychedelics can give us that experience of ego death and of having to let go of attachment. So definitely all my psychedelic experiences have, for the most part, been pretty intense ego death moments, and I've had to let go multiple times. And it'll still hurt, it'll still be scary, I'm sure, but you know, I think that's the practice, is to just be with the fear, be with the attachment, and try and put that attachment on something that will last forever.
You have a wonderful vocabulary, by the way. The other thing that I notice is that you're all your experiences and all your knowledge, it all comes back to that inner world, that inner source. It makes for, I really look forward to hearing from the people who listen to this podcast and hear their response, because I think that how fortunate that you have your guru and spiritual teachers, and that you are that also in the world as much as you want to be, because it's just naturally in you.
I love that. I love this line of thinking and thought, and how do we balance it? Because there's a great, amazing book by one of my beloved master teachers who I've never met, but I've just met him through his work. You know, he passed away, I think, in the 80s. Srila Sridhar Maharaj. And the book is called Sri Guru and His Grace. And it's so sad right now that Guru has gotten hijacked by people in my industry and the entrepreneur industry. And I don't mean that they meant it maliciously. It just feels a little wrong. Like it feels like we're appropriating this term and then making it about bad, generally white males who are, you know, doing large business operations and coaching operations, and they're called gurus. And it's sad, because true guru has to be able to liberate you from bondage and suffering and take you to a higher realm. Like that's what the idea of guru is someone who can, by their very presence, they can give you transcendental knowledge. They can give you knowledge that is beyond the senses, and they can affect change in your heart just by their association, and they can connect you with the Supreme. And it's, you know, it's pretty confronting for some people, and it's confronting for me. I'll just talk about myself. It's confronting for me because it requires surrender, and it requires, you know, people say there's no one in between me and God. It's me, I got me and God, and I don't need to put anyone between me. And the Vaishnava philosophy is that God lives in the hearts of the devotees, that the lover of God has God in their heart. And if we can't acknowledge that, then how is there any way that we can be with God? And so what you were saying there, where it's like, if Guru is outside, then we also can be that conduit, or we can be hollow and let our guru come through. And, you know, I studied martial arts and Kung Fu. They have a disciplic succession too. And one of the things my Sifu would say often is his teacher said, never change anything, never change anything, never change anything. And now we have all these video recordings and technology, but in ancient times they had oral, you know, they just passed it down through speech and voice. And it's almost like we're coming back to that in a way with Clubhouse, with podcasting. We're like coming back to the power of voice and the power of connection. But how do we know it's true? And how do we know what to listen to? And, you know, it's a huge topic of conversation. I actually got into it on a recent podcast on my show, Be On Air, with Jai Jagannath. And we get into it a little bit in that episode, and it's called Building Spiritual Community. It's on my website. Maybe we can put it in the show notes. But if anyone's interested on hearing a little bit more about truth, figuring out what truth is, listening to Guru, how to discern who Guru is and integrate that knowledge, I think that's a great episode. But, we're taught in my tradition to be humbler than a blade of grass, to be more tolerant than a tree, and to give all respect to others and expect none in return. And, there's something really scary that happens when you get into a role of power, when you get into a role of like, oh, people should listen to me. And one of the last impediments on our path to home, whatever that is for the individual soul, its highest evolution, is prestige, or the desire to be famous and to be known. And what that does is it turns our soul away from our inherent nature, according to this tradition, which is to just be in service and love with the divine, not trying to make myself God, but trying to worship God. And it's like, do I want to be nectar, or do I want to taste nectar? If I want to taste nectar, I need to be different from nectar to taste it. If I am nectar, that's all it is. And so that's where the separation comes between the soul and God, because in order to have the devotion, in order to have a relationship, we need our own identity. And it's an inconceivable truth that the founder saint of our line, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, about 500 years ago, kind of coined. He combined all of the Vedic preceptors and his teachers, and he kind of gave a final offering, which is that we are simultaneously one and different with the supreme eternal being. And that's achintya bheda bheda tattva, the truth of simultaneous oneness and difference. But it is a little inconceivable. It doesn't quite fit into our human intellect with words. So these are just an approximation pointing at that direction.
You make it really fascinating and make me want to know more. So well done. We are running out of time. And before we wrap up, I wanted to know if there's anything else that you want people to know about you or about your work, or a message.
Yeah, I've gotten the privilege of working with you for a while, Lynn, and I'm really excited about what you're doing with this podcast and how you're making it interactive. And I've gotten to receive, like I said, your body scans, which was really helpful, honestly, and provided me new insights and clarity. And I think all I can say to everyone is, like, stick around for this ride of this podcast, because Lynn's working on some really amazing stuff. And I believe that she's part of a really amazing tribe of people, crew of people that are amplifying love and amplifying spirit. And yeah, I don't have anything too particular to share at this point. If you are interested in combining spirituality and entrepreneurship, if you have a spiritual business and you're trying to kind of figure out how to get to the next level financially, and especially if you are interested in podcasting and the power of building your brand or your business with your voice, then that's what I really love right now. And I'm always happy to just hop on the phone. People can apply for a free strategy session on my website, which is, maybe we can put it in the show notes, but it's podcast-farm.com/apply.
Podcast Farm. Okay. Thanks so much for being with me. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to many more conversations with you. And I hope that our listeners listen to the whole thing and get all of the amazing information too. I'm going to stop recording in a moment and we can wrap it up.
That is wonderful. Thanks so much for having me on, Lynn.
And this is K.Lee, our guest for today.